Again, like I said, thank you for coming to Connecticut Horror Fest this year. Thank you for welcoming the cast of the Saw films to Connecticut Horror Fest. Tobin Bell, as you know, played John Kramer in all of the Saw films.
Yeah.
Shawnee Smith, who started out with a small role in the first. It blossomed into personally my favorite role in the whole franchise. I love Amanda Young. I'm a little crazy.
Be careful.
Sean Patrick Flannery. So, let's start off with Mr. Bell. How did you first, assuming you were probably the first casted, I would assume, how did you get the role? Did James Wan reach out to you directly? Is it something he sent you script for? You didn't have to audition, I assume. Tell me about how it came about.
I think that who played Detective?
Glover. Danny Glover.
Danny Glover, yes. I think Danny Glover was cast first.
Awesome.
Carrie Always maybe was cast second. I don't know anything beyond that, and I'm just surmising that. I played a role in a television series called Once and Again, and I was Patrick Dempsey's father. And,
I was cast 754th. Just I remember that shit.
It was a series that was on just before we did Saw, maybe a year before that. And I played Patrick Dempsey's father, and I was a guy who you didn't see, who just lingered in the darkness with a hat and a trench coat. And Patrick, on Once and Again, was psychotic and had heard voices, and one of those voices was his father. And so he would have one of his episodes, and he would start to hear these voices, and that's when I would appear in the shadows, and I would say stuff like, "You're shit, you've always been shit, you'll never be anything else."
Terrible father.
Just like my dad, actually.
Terrible. And but I used this voice, and the woman who cast Saw cast Once and Again. And when James Wan got lucky with his 10-minute short, and Saw was on the boards, she remembered me. And she said, "James, you got to see this guy." And so I went and I sat and talked with James for a little bit and read some of the tapes, and I made some suggestions to him, of course, some of which he followed. One key one he didn't, and he was probably smarter than me. And that's how I got the part. One thing leads to another. So, one of those situations where say yes when you can, and it can become something. You never know.
Awesome. Thank you.
That's pretty much the opposite of what I'm telling my 20-year-old daughter right now. Say yes whenever you can. I'm like, no, my name is no. My sign is no. My number is no.
Yeah, that's
all about no.
Having an 8-year-old daughter, I'm with you. I'm with you on that. Shawnee, now your role obviously much smaller in the first film. Did you have any inkling? I guess not, because nobody knew what it was going to become. Nobody knew the mega hit that Saw would become in the horror world, especially.
There were no small roles.
That's true. When did you first realize not only how big a hit it was, but that you were going to have a much larger role moving forward?
Well, I realized it was going to be a big hit when it premiered in Sundance.
Okay.
We were all sitting in the back, the producers and James and Lee. Mm-hmm. And were you there, Tobin, at Sundance?
I wasn't there.
Yeah, I didn't think you were.
I was in the Czech Republic.
When you stood up off the ground in that theater, I'll never forget it. And this is like Sundance, you know, a bunch of like, snooty, you know. And they lost their ever-loving mind, man. The theater erupted. People were blown away. Then they started clapping, and I mean, I've never seen anything like it. And we were all, it was palpable.
Was it
you know?
the first time you had seen the finished film?
Yeah.
What was your reaction? Were you blown away?
It was pretty, well, I spent most of the movie like watching through my mini screen.
Because notably, it's everybody knows, I think, that you're not much of a horror fan.
Well, I just don't like to be scared, and I get scared. Like, I couldn't sit through the first Halloween. This time last year, my neighbor had we were new neighbors, and he had a screen up and some friends over to watch Halloween. I was the only one screaming and jumping halfway through. I said, I'm just going to go in the house with the kids. Because I was stressed, you know? Anyways. And the second part of that was...
At what point did you realize that your role was...
because I lived. Because I was the only one that lived.
Yep.
And then there was something in... Most of the time when I signed, you know, a lot of times I write, he helped me, because that was the essence. Something in that line caught the imagination of James and Juan, the producers, like, oh, that's like, because have this huge hit, and they're like, where do we go with this, you know? So there was something there, and being the only one to live through it helps. Yeah.
Excellent. Sean, you came in later. Had you seen the other ones before you were asked to be in Saw 3D?
I had never seen a single Saw.
Okay.
Nope.
Okay. Are you a horror fan? You better say yes. Man. You better say yes.
I'm a fucking rebel.
There you go.
I'm actually not.
Okay.
I'm a good fan.
Fan of good film.
I like good films.
Sure.
You know, some of them are scary, some of them are romantic comedies. I mean, my favorite films run from, you know, Life is Beautiful with Roberto Benigni to Grease.
Yeah.
You know, I love Grease. You know what I mean? It's like, everybody claims
I love
to love...
Grease, too.
Thank you, man. Everybody claims to love Chariots of Fire.
We can
How many
do a
friends
musical Grease
have you
number.
seen at their house that on their shelf? Fucking none. They all have Grease on the shelf. They all have Grease. You know what I mean? So I love good films. Certainly there's some scary films that I love. I love The Exorcist. I love the Damien movies. Those are just very cerebral. And,
They are.
And when I saw the first Saw too, I thought, you know, it's funny hearing you say that, because I was watching it, obviously, on DVD whenever they called me about Saw 7. And I watched, and I thought the same thing. The minute he stood up, I had no clue. No clue. I mean, I saw that for the first time. Nobody giving me a spoiler in all those years. And I was like, oh shit. I mean, I was that Sundance crowd, and I was like, okay, holy shit. So yeah, it was the first time for me.
And exactly what Shawnee said, I remember seeing Saw in the theater, and it was the same. I was one of those people that stood up. As soon as he stood up, I was like, come on, get out of here.
Yeah.
And the whole theater was really, so it was a...
People, I mean,
Yeah, it was a
I
moment.
remember my friend Benji of Skin Dread, an awesome band, but he's there from Wales. I don't know if anyone's heard of him, but you should look him up. But he was in Wales, and they were in line, you know, and some jack said, the guy on the floor gets up, and he was beaten to like
As anybody who reveals spoilers should be.
Dead serious about, you know, like, that's sacred ground, you know.
Yeah.
That's why I said there are no small roles, because, well, for lots of reasons. But it's not a matter of how many lines you have. It's a matter of where you fit in the story and what your power is in the storyline. One of the first films I did was Mississippi Burning. I didn't have a big part in that film, but Gene Hackman brings some FBI agents down from Washington, and I'm one of those 3 agents, and I help solve the crime. And not a big part, but pivotal, as they say, you know. So say yes, even the small parts.
You know what I asked you earlier when we were in this room for the breakfast? I said, what was that where you were tied to the wagon wheel? You know why I asked you that? Because earlier we were talking about just like that. You know, sometimes somebody is just significant on camera. And anybody raise your hand if you ever saw The Quick and the Dead. Well, he was the dude that was tied to the wagon wheel in the beginning. And the entire film, I was like, I want to know more about that motherfucker. That motherfucker was on the wagon wheel.
Yeah.
And it's true. It
I was
really
cut.
is.
I was cut out of the movie. There was more of me in the
Yeah.
movie, so be prepared. Say yes, but be prepared to get cut.
But I don't think I was alone in going, wait a minute, what about the dude, that mad dude that was tied to the wagon wheel? You know?
Yeah. His name was Dog Kelly.
Good fucking name, dude.
That is a good name.
It's a Sam Raimi movie called The Quick and the Dead. It's about gunfighting in a western town.
Gene Hackman. Great movie. I love it. I've always loved that movie. Russell Crowe. Yeah, great movie.
Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah, DiCaprio. Young. He was young.
Some tiny, small B actors, you know.
Nobody's ever heard of those guys.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's if you've never seen it, definitely see Quick and the Dead. It's cool. Question for you about the Bobby Dagan character. How do you view him? Do you view him as a tragic character? Do you feel bad for his arc? Because I mean, he kind of brought it upon himself in my eyes. How do you feel about it when you read for the character? How did you feel about it?
I think he's a steaming pile of shit.
Okay. I was trying to get
You know what I mean? I'm not going to get too cerebral on it, but I mean, obviously, anytime you play a role, you got to convince yourself that it's right.
Yeah.
And you got to throw some conviction in there. I mean, I'd argue articulately why he was, you know, well-founded in what he did, but yeah, from the outside, steaming pile of shit.
Yeah.
You know?
All right. Well, you are
He
an honest
deserved
man.
everything he had coming to him. Failed miserably to save everyone his loved ones.
Yes, he
Ended
did.
up poking holes in his titties to no avail. Didn't save my wife. He roasted her in a brass pig. What the fuck? Who does that? His wife. She's frying up to a crispy golden bronze.
Yeah.
And that brass pig. Where the fuck did you get a brass pig? I'm not worried about the wife. I want one of those. I want a big brass pig. Turn it into a pizza oven, you know?
Shawnee,
Did you guys get that?
yeah, those are
Brass
Beastie Boys.
piggy.
Beastie Boys.
That brassy piggy.
Brassy piggy, that's what me the
And the piggy comes round and my wife gets roasted. Brass piggy.
So, Shawnee, as a not a lover of horror, how did you feel about the script the first time you read it?
Well,
I mean, I know you've done The Blob, which is
I'm a lover of horror.
just
For
not
the
being scared.
genre and the fans.
Yep.
I just don't like to be scared. I get mad when I get scared. And it doesn't end well. You know, stressful.
Yeah.
But what was your question?
How did you feel about the role when you read for it?
Oh, well, it was kind of a tough time at the time in life, and so I read it and I said, oh gosh, like, pretty cool story, but I didn't have it in me. I didn't think I had it in me to live that out.
It's an intense
even
story.
for a day. You know, I'm just like, I just don't have it in me. And then, but thank you, you know. And then they said, just come into the office and watch the scene, because that's the scene that they filmed.
This is the short, right?
And so I said, okay, you know, that was so nice to ask me to, you know,
Yep.
say hello again. And I came in and watched it, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's bitchin'. I can live. I'll get my shit together to go live that out.
Awesome. Well, we're all.
And then I
thankful.
had the flu the day that we filmed, so
Oh.
it was like I just made it all like my acting teacher, he would say, use what exists. Use what exists. Pay attention to what exists and use what exists. And so between the flu and the jaw trap and the big heavy metal thing and the life experience at the time, I mean, I just used it all.
Right. Excellent. Well, thank you for using it.
Thank you for asking. Thank you guys for watching and being the greatest, most loyal fans of any franchise history. You guys are blow my mind, my heart.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Horror fans are passionate people. Somebody downstairs asked me to ask you a question, Mr. Bell, and I thought it was an interesting question. They said, ask him if, in reading the scripts for any of the films, were there any traps written that you said, I think this is too much? I think, because as we know, some of them are brutal. Some of them are really tough. Was there any that where you said, I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know if my character would do this. I think this might be too much. Anything that crossed the line in your head when you read it?
I didn't pay a lot of attention to the traps.
Okay.
There were too many other things to pay attention to, and there were people who were much better than me at thinking about what was possible, doable, what they wanted to include. You got to remember, I mean, as much as I care about the through lines and the threads and John's what's going through his head and how he relates to others and what his motives are and that all of that kind of thing. This is a horror movie, and people go to be scared, but that's not my forte. And so I rely on others who are more in a position to make those decisions, and they're technicians and artists and very talented people who design those traps and did a marvelous job doing it, and I knew that they would make them work. And I know there was a lot of discussion at one point in time how the traps really varied from being extremely simple mechanical devices to being very complex as the series progressed. I let them have those discussions and come to conclusions without. I was too busy paying attention to how I could enrich the scenes that I had with whomever I had those scenes and make them more human and more personal, so that there would be another layer in the film. I wasn't thinking about layering it. I was thinking more about moment to moment, trying to create reality like it was happening for the first time, moment to moment. And that was my job. That's what actors do. They try to bring humanity to whatever character they're playing, whether it's an astronaut or a priest or a guy who lives in a loft and designs mechanical machines to trap assholes. So I always am looking for something deeper than what's on the page. You see, all those things they're right there. They're written on the page. The events are going to play out the way they're written on the page. They don't need me to do that. They need me to fill in the places and bring them alive, bring the moments alive.
Excellent.